Soccer fields in Latin America, popular sports are increasingly making their way onto the streets of China, the courts in Nigeria, sporting arenas in Qatar. This new wave of sport brings with it hybrids and innovations, new rules and new games, inspiring you, fans, communities and nations to be creative and daring. Extreme sports popularity has exploded and has gained corporate recognition, huge fan bases, and media attention. It is helping to create a new generation of sporting venues and competitions. From the West to the Middle East and to Asia, sport is changing the landscape of emerging countries, invigorating their people and economy, and creating new possibilities for everyone who plays.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back Adnan Nawaz.
And welcome back to all of you. So it's about the new frontiers of sport, and it's not just about taking new sports to established markets, but also established sports to new markets. I saw underwater ice hockey there. Sepak takraw, that's a very interesting Asian sport. I don't know if you've ever heard of fronton. I was in Peru a couple of months ago. This guy was telling me, oh, you must try this sport. It's called fronton. It's a bit like squash. And I played paddle tennis in Mallorca just about 5 days ago. All really interesting sports that actually visually as well would really make for quite good TV. So we have Ho Bin. Ho Bin is a triple Paralympic champion from China in the high jump. And Ho Bin, you also lit the Paralympic flame in Beijing 2008. Bobby Sharma, IMG, Senior Vice President. Basketball is your main thing, I believe. But you also try to develop and manage media rights, for new markets. And Laurent PETRYNKA, Laurent, you're from France. It says here, President International School Sports Federation, but you've also worked bilaterally with a few Latin American countries as well, close relationships, especially Brazil, I believe. And you're also the National Director of France's National Union of School Sports. That's the federation that manages sports in France's secondary, the senior schools. So we're talking about, let's say, first of all, new sports in established markets. Bobby, can you sell me or sell the product, cricket, to China? How do you do that?
I was prepared for the question. I still don't think I can answer that. But if forced to give an answer, I'd say probably not. I'd say that, are there other established sports that could be sold in China? Absolutely. And the premise of this being that globally, there's incredibly unrealized potential, an enormous amount of unrealized potential, both economically and socially. The mature sports economies are basically limited to United States, Western Europe, and Australia, and even those have come of age only in the last 2 or 3 decades. And as late as the 1990s, the EPL was a moribund league with a £3 million.
The English Premier League. Yeah.
Yes, just now one of the most dominant, if not the most globally dominant sports leagues, with £1 billion+ a year media deal, had a £3 million deal as late as the 90s. The Taylor Report came out, and through a series of changes, systemic changes and standardizations, the EPL has become the global force and economic force that it is. In the 80s, I used to work at the NBA. The NBA in the 1980s had their playoff games on tape delay. And it really wasn't until 1992 and the Dream Team came about when the sort of global and commercial explosion, also the confluence of Michael Jordan entering the picture and Larry Bird and their great rivalry, when that league started becoming an economic force. So if in 2012, Price Waterhouse estimated that the global sports economy was $120 billion. It's the last reference I saw to the sort of aggregate value, but if you extrapolate the rate of growth, even at a 10% compound annual growth rate, extrapolate that a couple of decades, you're talking about hundreds and hundreds of $billions in value to be grown. And our premise in my work at IMG has been that much of that will be grounded in the creation of world-class, from the same constructs as these Western sports leagues, professional sports leagues and entertainment products. And it's because it's the live domestic content that has such great exponential value in our information modern media age.
You've raised so many issues that we're going to talk about over the next 25 minutes or so. But because we started with China, let's stay with China. Ho, cricket is a massive sport in some parts of the world. But which established sports is China ready for that it doesn't have at the moment, do you think?
中国的新体育其实更应该感谢。
For Chinese, in China we have 1.3 billion people, and the sport, the culture is increasing and changing. It's improving, and the sports changes. The request of the need for sport for the person is very important. In China,
people need a sport because there is a growing middle class in China. They need some kind of entertainment. Is that what you're saying? Because the audience is already there, they just need to find the right product to give that audience.
There's two reasons. One is the product, the other one is the media, and is a model. For China now, the development of China, so the increase of the improvement of the culture and the improvement of culture is increasing with the sport.
I'll translate anything that's relevant to something that I ask you, okay? Laurent? Anybody would admit the same, that selling cricket to China is very difficult. So therefore, I think, are we saying that it's the local culture that you have to take into account, and without that, that you absolutely can't sell any product if the culture isn't right?
Completely. As my experience as president of International School Sport Federation, I would consider it is good to sell, but it is also good to take in consideration the local culture and the Roots program. And in my experience, I would say the new frontiers of sport, for me, it's my opinion, but I'm very convinced on that. It is youth, for sure it is youth, and it is an answer to your question. It is youth, and particularly youth at school. I will explain. First of all, in International School Sport Federation, we are touching more than 250 million pupils in the world, and during the year, 250 days a year. So it means we have the youth in the end, and the youth is most probably the best news frontiers for the future generation. For that, few stencil about youth. First of all, it's our social responsibility. It's also social, but also marketing point of view. Okay. I think this is the same subject. Second point of that, I'm not so sure that in emerging country and also in developed country, youth is practicing more and more. It depends of the countries, but sometimes they are practicing less, and they have to face problem of obesity, etc. For sure, they like classic sport. They like basketball. They like cricket sometimes, but not always. I'm sorry for your answer. They like football. They like athletics. So we have to consider that you have new frontier for new sport, but not so much. We have to be based also on the very strong sport, because this is the most important number of pupils, of young athletes that are practicing sport. So for me, the problematic for emerging countries, because it was also your question, is that the major leagues are not so well organized in emerging countries. I will take some example, but when you go farther, when you go to retreated zone, or to war zone, etc., there is no major league. But there is a school in each village and each city, in each part of the country, all over the world. And the best play to reach the new frontier of sport, for me, it's to touch youth through school, and not only with our model. Our stencil are quite old, I think, in this point. So reaching the youth through school, it can be a good opportunity to. So to answer to your question, how to sell cricket to China, it's not so easy subject. China is practicing a lot of sport. They are one of the most famous country in school sport, for example. So up and down, it could be the best policy to increase the practicing of youth.
Bobby, okay, yeah. Listen, okay, but I was going to talk to you exactly about one of the issues that Laurent raised about major leagues in emerging economies markets, because that's one of the things that you're really involved in right now, trying to set up a professional basketball league in Nigeria. What are the big challenges there? How is it going?
Yeah, I was just going to jump off of something he said, and then I'll talk about Nigeria, I'll talk about India. But at the end of the day, yes, emerging markets are the focal point for this sort of development, in the sense that GDP growth begets middle class growth begets disposable income growth, which begets consumption, which ultimately creates competitive media markets. And if you look at the difference between the developed sports economies and their top flight leagues and their success and any other league, and even in some of the developed markets, the backbone is the media piece. And in the emerging economies with which present the largest opportunities, it's simply based on the macroeconomics and the demographics. So you look at Nigeria, it's almost 200 million people. 2/3 of the population is under the age of 30. You look at India, half the population of 1.2 billion is under the age of 25. And you have this enormous emerging middle class that literally in the next decade is going to grow by 1 billion. Within the next 2 decades is going to grow by 3 billion. So there's an enormous amount of disposable income and consumers looking for a place to put their money and a place to be entertained. And we all know, all at a conference like this, the power and appeal of sport, and as an economic consequence and as a social consequence. And it's a proven fact that high quality domestic sports on home soil resonates incredibly. So the London Olympics was watched by 90% of the UK. So even in the most advanced, mature sports economies, that's the case. But we always hold out at IMG the work we did to help the BCCI, the cricket board in India, create the IPL, is the prime example of demonstrating this need and illustrating this point, that the need that was fed. Was conceived in 2007. I wasn't there at the time. I was at the NBA at the time, but and a lot of people take a lot of pride in this for some reason. But the whole thing came together very quickly in less than a year, and the launch teams were sold for $90 million, and the expansion teams a few years later were sold for $350 million.
And that's just the teams, let alone the salaries that they're paying the players.
And what's even more crazy is these were essentially licenses for teams, not like the deed in perpetuity like North American sports leagues are. So they have $1 billion TV deal now too, and that's all premised on the reality of the hundreds of millions of people that watched it. And very recently we launched a soccer league in India where we've had 170 million people, I think, watching it. There was a kabaddi league which was launched, which I'm sure a lot of people here are not familiar with, but I'm sure some of you are. But it's basically a rural recreational game that got commoditized and now turned into a very significant property. So all this stuff is happening very fast in India, where there's this enormous marketplace, but still a maturing economy and a media market. And imagine, you asked about Nigeria, the opportunities there. And something that I think cricket is a very almost niche sport in the sense that, there's billions of people, thanks to India, that are crazy about it, or at least 1 billion people. But it's really, successful in certain Commonwealth legacy countries. But the global sports of soccer and basketball, which is what my company has been focused on, hold universal appeal for many, many reasons. I think one of them is that it's played by both boys and girls. I think it's played in schools, which I think is part of what feeds the consumer interest, because there's that participation interest from a young age. But you look at countries like Nigeria and Africa continentally, which in aggregate is like another India or China, and frankly is growing at a much quicker rate. 7 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world sit there, as I'm sure many people here know. And the opportunities are immense, and both, and I keep saying from an economic and a social perspective. Economic in the sense that there's all this, franchise money to be made, media money, and sponsorship money, but the approach is not really purely capitalistic. It's not transactional. What can we extract out of these economies? It's how can we invest as partners in these countries for the long term to help grow their economies through sport, and to create world-class properties worthy of economic and developmental investment by all stakeholders.
Okay, Ho, the infrastructure in terms of establishing new sports in any market is going to be important, because you need the infrastructure of the stadiums, you also need the infrastructure for the practice, you have the environmental concerns. None of that presumably is any problem for China, because it's a rich enough country to be able to afford to do almost anything it wants. Has it got the commitment to bring new sports into the country? Does it understand the importance of doing that?
好的。
There's a very interesting program in China. There are like 13 persons. They walked hiking on Gobi Desert. I walk with 1,500 players, competitors, with walk on desert. They are all from the companies. They are all like bosses or the organizer from the famous companies. They come together. They walk on the desert for 4 days, and then realize that what's the meaning of life. And everyone changed. They changed a lot since after the challenge. The huge change after 2008 Beijing Olympic and Paralympics. There's a huge space for China as well. There's the great advantage for China to grow this market, the new sports. And he's talking about Linar, and who is the famous tennis player. And then she's a great example for people, for the whole world, to promote Chinese new sports. Okay, thank you.
Delay is because of the translation that we're getting and you're all getting. Laurent, what qualities are transferable? What can new sports learn from the established ones? Which values are transferable?
I strongly believe that listening to you, that there is a win-win-win situation. We say win-win, and I will say win-win-win. With practice, with marketing, and with social responsibility. And I strongly believe that we can work on the three subjects, and most of the time the social responsibility is one of the parts which is not really clear. For example, I believe in the policy to give to the new countries very fast big events, big events. That policy was adopted by Qatar, by China, by Turkey, by Brazil. All the last emerging country, now a very developed country, have reached the opportunity to organize big events. And when you organize big events, immediately it has an impact to the practice for youth, of course, but not only for youth, impact of the structure that you told for China. So there is immediately a big impact. So we have to trust the new countries to organize a big event. But I will add something very important. I think now that CSR, the social responsibility, is not taken by big organizations and also big bodies. I will give some example. In Brazil, that suffer a little, that in front of the big World Cup, there is marketing, no problem for that, but the social responsibility was not so here, so they had some problem. In the English League, for example, the professional English League of football give a lot of money to Roots program in order to develop practice. So we cannot be opposition, you cannot have an opposition between the big event and the social responsibility. So the proposal also could be that at each big event and also each big bodies, like IOC, like Doha Goals, like all the names that you know, they will have a strong policy in CSR in order that to increase the local practice, the youth practice, for sure for adults also, but you know, thinking before the policy of the event, the policy of the body, in order to have a real social responsibility through youth, I think this is the most important view. So win-win-win.
Okay, but I'll pick up on your point of giving the big events to certain countries. There is another way to market an established sport in a new market, and that's to take your established sport to that new market. Mm-hmm. In other words, the NFL coming to London. The English Premier League, which we're talking about a lot, is now again thinking about taking some of its competitive games we're talking about to the United States. So the question is, Laurent, does that sport then lose, and that match lose a bit of its soul because it's detached geographically from its core fans?
It is our responsibility to go to spread the new values of sport. So it is really clear that you must impact. You won't sell your soul going to other country, organize the sport in this country. More than that, because we are always talking about social responsibility, but it's beginning to be more and more important in the world. If we don't do that, in some countries, we must admit they will have a lot of problems. So it is not only doing sport. This is really a political message that the major leagues can do a special effort in order to impact, organize events, growing bodies inside the country in order to bring peace and to bring also a lot of practice will mean a lot of social responsibility also.
Bobby, how do you measure the success of a new sport? Do you judge by the number of fans in the stadiums, the amount of media coverage, the amount of TV revenue that's being paid to televise that sport? What is it exactly that you're looking for to measure the success?
I think from a business perspective, it is all those things. But you know, picking up on your last question, I think, I mean, you asked whether the sport is losing its soul by playing games outside of its home.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah.
So I think that you got to maybe fine tune that because you know, soccer isn't just the EPL, and if the EPL is playing games in the United States, it's to grow their fan base as a business. And I think in the world we live in, even the most successful leagues have to do that in order to grow their bottom line. And so in the case of the NFL, with and I think it's, you know, well understood that within a few years they'll have a team in London at the direction
Correct.
they're pointing. I don't think that's selling their soul at all. If anything, it's expanding your soul. And so, in the sense though that those are ultimately businesses. What's more interesting is the question you initially posed about something like cricket in India, but I think really if you look at you know, we'll say basketball in India is a better example where it's something that is played in I'm sorry, you said cricket in China, right?
Cricket, yes,
Yeah,
that's
sorry.
right. Yeah.
But basketball in India is a better example because it's actually something that they know, but it's not commercialized. So, and again, it doesn't do anything to the spirit or soul of the game of basketball, but grow it. And I think it's win-win in the sense that the more we create a consumer culture for professional sports, you're really creating that culture of health and wellness and social interconnectedness that comes with sport. So it's not really a loss in any of these equations. I think it's a gain.
Hobin, basketball in China is approaching, the basketball league there is approaching its 20th anniversary, only 20 years. What was the popularity like before the event of Yao Ming, and is it really due to him that the sport has become so popular in your country?
Yes, the Yao Ming has changed because he's playing. He wants to change his subject up because of Yao Ming, because he's so famous. China needs a lot of samples like Deng Yaping, like Yao Ming, like Lina, because they need like a superstar to lead the Chinese people. And just like disabled people there in China, they see through the media they can seek for help. Sports is not only only sports, but also they to to recover the people, to encourage people to seek hope. I've been done a lot of prosthesis installation for the kids who lost their legs. But when they stand up again, they got hope. And then when they stand up and they can run, and then after they can run, and then they can even just do more things like sports.
League, because simply it's one thing taking a team from one side of China to the other, but how many fans could actually go from one side of China to the other to watch their team play so far away, thousands of miles?
The main the audience that they get through the internet, television, but not just by traveling from side to side. And the media works a lot in China because and China needs a lot of new media to come to China to promote new sports. They need like a process, and China is welcome, or like the new sports to. I've been talked to the gentlemen in the green room, and then his son is 4 years old, and he likes soccer and basketball. So sports, new sports to Chinese is not only because he changed the life, their family lives.
So much that I forgot about any questions from the floor, because this is a topic that could be, interesting or relevant to so many different parts of the world about taking these sports to different areas. So we have got just about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. We'll extend it a bit if you have some questions. But in the meantime, Ho is talking about TV and internet viewers in one side of China watching their team playing on the other side. The Primera Liga's Super Clásico a few weeks ago, it kicked off particularly early in Spain because, as Florentino Perez has been saying for quite a few years, the Real Madrid president, he wants to capture the Asian market. And that's one of the reasons the English Premier League is so popular, because of their early kickoffs. Is TV money essential to the success of a new sport, Bobby? Can it survive without it?
It's not a question of survival. I think that you can survive in a ticket-led economy. I think a lot of sports leagues currently do around the world. What it's about is how to get it to thrive, and you can't do that independent of the media rights, and whether it be traditional broadcast or digital or both. frankly, it has to be both these days. That is the fundamental key towards success. And that's not to say that it's all about revenue to be put into the pockets of the corporates. It's really about revenue to come into the system to create the right infrastructure and operational systems to establish that world-class property. And so without the viewership, without the broadcast money, you have an inability to deliver a world-class product. So it's a chicken and egg kind of thing, but structured the right way and executed the right way, there is this enormous amount of opportunity to create, not only in the emerging world. The emerging world is just where the biggest margins are, where the biggest ground floor opportunities lie, but even in the developed world, I think we can look at many advanced economies and look at their sports leagues and say that's not like it is in the United States, that's not like it is in the UK, that's not like it is, or even certain leagues in the UK don't even fit this, but and that's not what it's like in much of Europe. And there is an opportunity to commoditize this, and it all gets back to the question you posed to who, which is about the time and what you're alluding to with this question. The value of live domestic programming, sports and entertainment programming, is just growing exponentially by the day, and that's simply driven by the fact that, and I mean, as great as the NBA is, it will always struggle to have a significant media valuation in India because its games are on at 4 or 5 a.m., 6 a.m. in the morning. Could an Indian Yao Ming help change that and move the needle? Absolutely. Could it turn it into a true billion-person market valuation, a billion-person market valuation? Not so long as it's not time-friendly. And the UK has always had the strength of being very time-friendly to, almost all of the world, including the United States. The games are not on at an unreasonable hour. They're on at 10 a.m. on a Saturday. And so it's really about delivering that domestic product as much for the temporal convenience as it is for that sort of authentic connection to the country.
Bobby, thank you very much. Any questions from the floor then? There is a hand up there and one over here. So if we can quickly, Bob directing me, can you just tell me, have we got the time for these? Can we take these 2 questions? Okay, 2 questions only, so carry on, please.
Okay, I am Ishita from India. I want to ask, can you tell us more about the challenges or the problems in establishing, say, basketball or squash in India? I mean, what was the biggest problem you'd face?
Bobby, keep it short if you can, because we're running over.
I'll keep it very short. And I won't answer that directly and specifically about basketball in India, but just I think it's a great question. What's the biggest challenge in emerging markets to do these sorts of business opportunities? And I think there's a tendency in much of the world to use sports as a political pawn as opposed to an economic engine of development. And it's overcoming that challenge and getting the stakeholders to understand that treating it the latter way is going to be a win for everybody, not just certain segments.
Excellent. And just over here, sorry, this gentleman caught my eye in the blue jacket here with the light shirt. Sorry, sir, because we have gone over time, but if we can have this one.
Jason Hensel from Jamaica. The UFC has become so popular, it seems almost overnight. What is the
The Ultimate Fighting Championship we're talking about, right?
UFC.
Yeah.
Do we see that threatening boxing, and what do we see that looking like 5 years' time, kind of good and bad?
Anybody, do you know UFC, Ho Bin? Yeah. Okay, you know this. Do you think it can challenge boxing? This is basically guys who are allowed to do almost anything except bite each other, pretty much, okay? Ultimate Fighting. Do you know this?
Yeah.
Okay. Can it challenge boxing?
The boxing is a very fresh area to him, but his classmates they play their own league. And he want to explain that China needs more like variety of sports, and he would like to talk about some new sports. I lost my leg when I lost my leg when I was 9, but when I was 15, I watched the media, like a TV, and then I being inspired, and I was being encouraged by the TV, by the media, and I changed my life. So that's what I want to show. I want to tell everybody, China needs like the people like you guys come to China to see the changes, not only for the buildings but also for the inside of Chinese people that we run. That this is the result that the new sports that come to China. And welcome you guys to come to China to see. Okay, thank you.
I wanted to tell you a story about culture in particular parts of the world, but I haven't got time. But if you come to me later, I'll tell you about a Belgian coach in South Korea and how he had to combat the hierarchical society and younger players passing the ball to older players just because they were older. They weren't in a better football position on the pitch, but it was just the hierarchy that demanded that the older player get the ball. And more on that if you want to talk to me about it later. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Ho Bin, Bobby Sharma, Laurent, PETRYNKA. Thank you very much, everyone.